What's going on, guys? Welcome to the first episode of the Me and My House podcast. I'm excited about this podcast because this is one that we've been planning for some time. When we first started this channel, the Vine Church TV channel, we were doing a lot of relationship podcasts, and I really enjoyed those, but I also felt like they weren't, like we didn't want Vine Church TV to be just relationship podcast kind of, channel. But I definitely did find benefit in that, and we did also a relationships Vine group, right? Like earlier, it was last year, right? Last year? Because this year we've been doing different ones. And I know that one was very, very beneficial too.
Good.
We even had a couple that got married, a couple that got engaged, some couples that got engaged. And so, I see a lot of benefit in that. And I definitely want to be talking about relationship stuff. So for that today, I have my beautiful wife with me, Pastor Leah. She's here with me today. And we're going to be talking, we're going to be talking today about celebrating each other's differences.
That is so important.
Now, recently we were at a dinner with another couple that just joined church, and we were talking about couple stuff. And I remember that we mentioned something. I heard you say something that you've actually said many times before, but I don't think we've really talked about it a lot on, like, I guess in public or like in front of cameras and stuff. And so I kind of want to talk about that. But you said the following thing. You said, and I quote, I thank the Lord for our marriage, but I would never go back to the first year of our marriage.
Oh my goodness,
right?
yes.
Okay, so I want you to unpack that, explain why, because that might sound harsh, but I agree with you. I wouldn't want to go back to year one either. But explain why. And I think that we have some couples, like I mentioned, some that are engaged and they're about to get married, some that just got married. And so I think that it's important that they kind of know what they're about to get into and maybe how to better navigate that. But explain why you even said that. Why did you say that?
The first year of marriage is a beast, something you wouldn't expect. You just finished a whole season of dating. No matter how long you've been dating and marriage is like two different worlds, right?
Yeah.
When you are dating, you still get to know each other. You get to get more information about one another.
Yep.
You're still in this like a sweet season where you're trying to like show off in a specific way to your significant other. You probably, hopefully know each other already on a very personal level, but dating and marriage, living together is we noticed differences about each other that I didn't even know that's supposed to or could be a difference.
Sure.
Like already things like how you brush your teeth and how I brush my teeth. I don't know, with what foot you first get up in the morning.
Sure.
Like little things you're like, why would you do it that way? But then after a year, after going through all those seasons, also communicating everything with one another, you will get to this understanding that, first of all, differences are always going to be there.
Yeah.
Differences are a given thing in any relationship, and especially in marriage. And if there's differences in your marriage, God must have put them there for a reason. So why not take that and run with
now,
that?
we're going to get into that, right? You just went already full positive. Let's just cut the pot here. But I want to get into like why, right, the differences are difficult. So like, for example, when we first started dating, like the first couple months were great. But then after that, I think that's where we, started seeing differences in one another. And that's probably where we had some of our first, let's call them arguments, right? Some of our first arguments. And then after that, it got better while we were dating. But then when we got married, it was like a restart, right? Like even though we had already been talking for some time, we had been dating for some time. Once we got married, it was again, like the first couple months were fine. Like maybe like the first 2 months were really good. But then after that, like the rest of that first year was rough, like really, really rough. Now, not to the point, obviously, where we were like, we want to split up or anything like that. But just, it was really challenging and maybe something that we both didn't expect. But I want you to talk about that. Like why for you, for example, I'll give testimony too about why for me, but I want to hear from you.
Thinking about it, I think the why for me specifically is because while you are dating, you know that you will get to know each other first, and there will be differences. I think what I thought is once I get married, the work is done. We can relax now. Since you married me, you must know me 100% already and must know how I am to like the little details of my life, and that you also act in a way I would act in specific situations. But what I think made me be a little bit, it just like threw me off in the first year of marriage is, okay, we are not done yet. We are still learning about each other. And it's not time to relax right now. We're still gonna have to work on our relationship and navigate around each other and within each other at home in our daily lives. Now there's not the, okay, I need some time for myself. Well, I'm kind of busy right now, so I'm not gonna take my phone. I just need more time for myself, right? No, you live together. You always got to be like with each other, right?
So because at least when you're dating, you can always be like, well, like after whatever, like, you know, whatever date or whatever. And I might not see you for 2 days or whatever, right? But like, you can't do that when you're married. Like you see each other all the time, right? Because you live in the same place. I think for me, the hardest thing was I am very particular in how I like things, right? And even so like outside, and I've said this before, like at church and at work, I think I'm pretty organized. Like I really like everything very structured. I like to be, you know, everything to run on time. I like for things to be in order. But at home, I want to have a place where I can just like not do any of that, right? And so I think that was probably a shock for you because you had been used to seeing me be so ordered and structured and everything, and then at home be like, I don't care here, right? Like, and so for you it was like, what? Like, what's going on? But I think that I think was part one, like one thing. But I think what was probably even harder was just that when you're married, the Bible, and we're going to get into it right now, but there's a language that the Bible uses that says two people become one flesh, right? And so like if you think about that, right, it's like taking, you know, you ever, this isn't a German joke. I just don't know. Did you guys have Play-Doh? You have Play-Doh in Germany?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I don't know if you call it something different. I know, but I don't know if you call it something different. But if you like, imagine if you take like two colors of Play-Doh, right, and you like squish them together, and you like it takes some time of like squishing them together until they really form and become one, right? And they turn even into like a different color. But like you really have to like squish them together for them to do that. And that's really the image of two people become one flesh, right? You have one person that has a whole way of doing life, and another person that has a whole way of doing life. One person that has ideologies that have been formed over time, and another one, same thing. And then you take it and then you go like, right? Like just like let's merge them together into one. And that's hard. That's really hard. Of course, marriage is a blessing and it's beautiful and it's fun. But a lot of times over the years, I've seen like people that split up, divorce and stuff happen a lot of times because of that, just because of the lack of being able to say, okay, I'm going to, I have this way of this view of life, and I have this view of life. One of us will have to submit. If not, both of us will like completely change it, and we'll, do something that works together. I remember one other thing that at the beginning was really rough too, was that we would go out with other, couples, right? And we would see maybe that they had a way of doing things, right? And I remember like one time you were like, well, look at them, like they do it this way and it works for them. And I remember, do you remember what I told you? What did I tell you? Do you remember?
No. No, you said something like, well, they are not us.
Exactly. Yeah. I said, they're not us and we're not them. Right. Yeah. And so like they might have something that works for them, and that's great. And that's beautiful. But you and I are not them. Right. And we have different, we're different people. And so we have to find what works for us. Right. Yeah. There has to be intentionality behind that. But the basis of what I want to talk about today that goes with this is that all of that happens because there are differences. Yeah. One mistake that I think as men, because I'm a man, right? So I think I can speak for men tonight. I'd like for you to speak for women, right? And we're speaking in generalities, but as a man, I think a lot of times we want to turn our girls into, or a girl, singular, our girl
nice
into,
catch.
We want to turn our girl into us. Yeah. Yeah. So like if I wake up late, let's just say, and you wake up early, I'm like, stop waking up so early. You should wake up later, right? Or like little things like that. That's a dumb example, but like little things like that, right?
That's a good point.
Or if you like, if you're someone that, I don't know, is adventurous and the other person isn't, and there's someone that's like everything's planned, right? And you're like, stop being like that. You should be more like me, right? And that's where the tension can begin to happen.
Yeah.
Now, again, those are very superficial examples. There's other examples that go deeper, especially when it comes, we haven't navigated this yet, but eventually we will, which comes like with raising children and that, like, if you don't fix it early, then when it comes to like deeper things, it's really hard, right?
Yeah.
And again, that's where a lot of fractures I think in marriages happen.
Yeah, I would love to jump into that because I think what you said right now is such a key point and would solve, I think, 90% of communication issues and arguments in any relationship. Something that I know you've never done to me, and I hope I haven't done to you.
Yeah, I'll tell you right now.
When we talk with each other, we don't say, you should X, Y, Z. Like, why don't you do it this way? You should X, Y, Z. Because whenever you say that, you literally attack the person in front of you. You're like, we are different right now. You should do that. And I think differently than you. I'm right. You are wrong. You're on your own. I'm on my own, right?
Yeah.
But that's not what marriage or relationship is at all. You're supposed to work together, collaborate. So what we do in any kind of situations or issues that come up, not between each other, but just like in somebody's life. Like if you have an issue, I have an issue, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like you should do that right now. Never say you should to your partner and like you'll have the heavenly like marriage.
Yeah.
But instead, maybe say something like, let's address this together. How about X, Y, Z? Don't talk to the person, talk to the problem, right? Like, hey, let's figure this out as a team.
Yeah.
But don't be like, you should figure it out.
Yeah,
right?
100%. Yeah, and I think that what we're going to get into right now, I think will help with that and the understanding of, again, like you have to know there's differences, right? Now, there's some differences, and this is what I want to talk about, but there are some differences that we both, like you said, have to acknowledge and go, is this a difference that is okay and actually it benefits both of us, or is this something that like we should probably change, right? Because it's gonna be like detrimental, right, for us later. And that's where discernment comes. I think that's where prayer comes in. That's where communication comes in. But I want to start off right tonight by reading a passage. It's found in Ephesians, and it's Ephesians chapter 5. Okay, it's a couple verses. So I'm gonna read a little bit. It's from verses 21 through 33. Yeah. So what I love about the Bible is that if you're ever like, you're Christian, you're in a, you just got married and you're like, dang, I wish there was like, a guide for us. It's not just the Bible. Actually, Ephesians chapter 5, literally the title of it says Instructions for Christian Households. It's titled Instructions for Christian Households, right? So listen to this. It says, verse 21, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Okay. Wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. Now, husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with waters through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church, without stain or wrinkle or without blemish, but holy and blameless. In this same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. I really like this part. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one ever hated their own body, but they feed and care for their body, just as Christ does for the church. For we are members of his body. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. That's what I was talking about earlier. 32, it says, this is a profound mystery, but I'm talking about Christ and the church. Verse 33 is the last one. However, each of you also must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. Okay, so this, and then if you continue into chapter 6, it talks about, instructions for children and their parents, but I want to focus on what it says, a Christian household, okay? I want to preface this by saying we're talking about a Christian household, okay? So I've always said this, and I'll say it again, I have no idea how non-Christian people do it. I literally have no idea. Because like for us, any issue that we have, any like sort of, whether it comes to our relationship, to finances, anything, we can go to the Bible and just like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And we follow that and it works out great, right? If this wasn't here, I don't know.
be very
And to
difficult.
be honest with you, again, I may be biased because I'm a pastor, but when I see society today and I see the way relationships work today and what they've turned into in a lot of times, and it's just a perversion of what Christ established for Christian households.
Yeah.
And so that's where we get a lot of problems. And it's, I think, for that reason that more than ever before, divorce rates are through the roof, both in church and outside of church. Because if you're not following this, then you're following someone else's guide for your relationship.
Yeah.
And then, it gets chaotic, right? But I kind of want to break this down. So the first couple ones, again, I want to preface it by saying that today, society might give us a different thing of what's acceptable or what's not, or what's right or what's not. I was recently listening to a song, and in that song they were talking about the word, right? And it was John Wilde actually, and he in one part he grabs the Bible and he says, "This is still the truth." He says, "And if you show me another truth," this is like during his ministering time. He says, "If you show me another truth, but it doesn't line up with this, then I don't want it. I don't want to know about it. I don't want a revelation of it. Like, I'm good with this," right? So in that same light, let's talk about this. Yeah. So it says, the first thing it says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ.
Yes.
This is
so
huge,
cool.
right? So it doesn't say submit to one another out of reverence for each other. It says submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Now, when we stand at the altar and we get married, right, we make a pact before the Lord, right? So I'm not just making a pact to you. And yes, I say, I promise or I swear that I'll be with you in sickness and health, and you do the same to me. Sure, we're doing that for one another, but we are saying it with the Lord and before the Lord, right? So this pact becomes a pact for the Lord.
Yeah.
Now, when issues come up, instead of me going like, okay, I gotta get through this issue, or we have to get through this issue just for each other. When Christ is the center, we go, yes, for each other, but also for Christ, because he's part of this relationship. Actually, he's not part. He's the center of this relationship, right? So I think that knowledge going into the rest of what we're going to talk about is important, right?
Yeah.
And then it says, wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands. That's important. You can't be just submit to anybody, okay? So submit to your own husbands as you do for the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. This is important. This past Sunday we did communion, right? And so the Lord says, the Apostle Paul quotes Christ in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 23 and on. He quotes Christ and he says, he grabs the bread and he says, "This is my body," right? So remember, in this passage it says, "For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body." So we have that word again, right?
Yeah.
But what does Christ say? He says, "This is my body, for that I give to you," and he breaks it and he begins to hand it to the disciples, right? And he says, "Eat of this body, right, and do this in remembrance of me." So knowing that, the way that Christ loves the church is he was willing for his body to break for the church. So he's willing to die for the church. He's willing to endure suffering for the church. Yeah. So as a woman, right, and you can speak to this, I would love for you to speak to this, but I can imagine that, you would want to be with someone that's like, I love you so much that I'm willing to die for you. Like, I'm willing to forget Prince Charming, forget, telenovelas. Like, I'm willing to die for you.
Yeah.
I'm willing to not eat so that you can eat. I'm willing, to like have to work X amount of hours so that you can have a place. Like, how would that make you feel? How does that make you feel?
I love it. I wouldn't want it any other way. I'm a little bit angry almost at the fact that a lot of time when this passage is being taken out,
of context.
A lot of people just read the first part of women submit to your husband.
Yeah.
Period. Yeah, it says that.
And we'll get to that.
Yeah. But it also means that you're submitting to somebody who is protecting you at all times, right? Yeah. It does not mean submit to somebody who's going to take advantage of you. It doesn't mean like, husband, do whatever you want, right? The responsibility that is being taken away from a woman so that she can feel protected and safe and flourish and start the family.
Yeah.
How else would you want to live?
Yeah.
Christ knew how to protect his people in every way possible. And that looks different for a husband or for a man than for a woman, right?
Yeah.
That's where the differences come in. But still, together, you submit to Christ.
Exactly.
So if you, as a woman now, speaking to all the women, if you aren't willing to submit to your husband, first of all, does that mean you don't trust him? Does that mean that you don't think he is the person that God called him to be? Does that mean he might need your support to step into the responsibility as a husband? And does that mean you feel too good to submit to Christ? Because if you can't submit to your husband, does it mean
you won't submit to Christ?
Right?
Yeah, for sure.
So it's all those different perspectives you have to have.
And I think there's like submission looks, again, verse 21 starts out by saying submit. It doesn't start out by saying wives submit to husbands. It starts out by saying submit to one another out of reverence. So like before he goes into all the details, he goes, by the way, before I start, just so you guys know, you're both going to have to submit to one another. Right?
Yeah.
So submission happens both ways. It's not just one way, right?
Yeah.
It's just, it looks different for each person. Yeah. But I really like what you said, because I think a lot of times, now I'll speak for as a man, right? A lot of times, you know, we like that verse and we go, verse 23, verse 22, and we go, yeah, you got to submit to me. Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay.
Have you earned it?
But yeah, are you being the man that is worth her submitting to you? Or are you just like, you just got to submit to me? Like, you know, I don't know what I'm doing, but just submit to me. Like, you know, I don't think that's fair. And I don't think that's how it was intended either. Now, again, you know, you talked about submission as a woman. Let me talk about submission as a man. Verse 25 says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. It says, and he gave himself up for her to make her wholly cleansed by the washing with waters through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church without stain or wrinkle or blemish, but holy and blameless. In this way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one has ever hated their own body, but they feed and care for their own body just as Christ does the church. This is super good. And I think it's like a big, like, you know, mic drop moment, right? Because Paul's saying, okay, you say you love your wife? Yeah. Okay. Well, then she should be just as like taken care of the way that you take care of yourself. Before you get married, before you're in dating even, like what happens is that you are innately looking for the best interest of yourself, right? Like, you know, let's say you're in elementary school, right? Who do you care about yourself, right? Your own grades. At lunch, you're, you know, eating your own lunch. The lunch that your mom packs for you, that's what you eat for yourself, right? Now, of course, at schools, there's some trading that happens, right? Between, you know, give you a Go-Gurt for this, and that's a different thing. But like, you're focused on your own grades, your own food. You grow, you go to college, you're focused on your own career. You graduate college, you're focused on your own, postgraduate career, right? So like now, you know, you're trying to find a job that makes enough money for you, and you look for where you wanted to go to school and where you want to live, and it's all about you. But the moment that you start dating someone, things begin to change. And then the moment you get married, then everything changes, right? And so here Paul says you have to love your wife the same way that you love yourself. Like, you don't go through the day and go like, well, you know, I don't care if I eat, right? You know, unless you're fasting or something, or you're dieting. But even after a while, you get hungry, right? And you go, I have to feed myself. And you clothe yourself. And you know, for the most part, people go and buy clothes that they like and that look good on them. And so you take care of yourself is what I'm trying to get to, and what Paul tries to get to here. So he says, in that same way, you have to care for your wife. Yeah. And then it gives us a little bit of insight. He says, I've never seen anyone that like hates that, you know, that says they love, you know, themselves and then does the complete different thing with their wife. Like if you care about yourself, then you'll care about your wife because you see her as one. Yeah. You guys are one. Yeah. It would be terrible that like you're really well taken care of, you know, you're well fed and all this stuff, and your wife's dying of hunger, right? Like that would look terrible, right? Like that would be terrible, right? And so I think that when there is that, when there's disparity is the right word, or I guess when there is a fracture there of like what you're supposed as a man recognize that your marriage is, you start realizing that like men that are, you know, for example, like abusive to their wives, or men that you know talk down to their wives or stuff, most likely it's because they don't love themselves either, right? And so there's something that happened. Something's wrong. Maybe when you were, you know, dating, something happened. Maybe when even before that, when you were younger. But one of the most important things is to analyze like yourself first, and the woman should analyze herself, like the wife should analyze herself. And then once you have both analyzed yourselves and go, okay, this is what I got to fix on me. And you go, this is what you got to fix on yourself. We can come together and talk about that. And I can tell you, which we've done, I can tell you, look, this is, I apologize because I was raised this way. I apologize because this is, something that happened to me before. I apologize, whatever, right? And you tell me the same. And I go, okay, now as a man, I promise you that I'm going to work on these things. And here's my plan for it. Not just like I'm going to try and, but here's my plan. And you do the same. And that's way better than at the beginning what you were saying. If I go to you and I'm like, yo, you got way too much attitude. You got to fix that, right? Like that's way different, right? As opposed to you recognizing that about yourself first. Like, hey, maybe I have an attitude issue. And then me recognizing about myself, like, hey, maybe I have like an impatience issue, right? And I think that if you both like are willing to do that on a consistent basis, because people change. I think we like for some reason think that after, I don't know, like age 18, you don't change anymore. But I'm very different today than I was, 3 years ago when we started Vine. I think I'm closer to God. I think, my perspective of people have changed in a good way. I think that, there's my goals have changed. So as a person, you change, and you've changed a lot too, right?
Yeah.
So then that means that we have to have like constant communication.
Yes.
For us, we do it every we do it often, but like consistently, we do it every New Year, right? Which I'm excited for because it's coming around the corner.
Yes, me too.
You want to talk about that, like how we sit down and what we do?
Yeah, we like to sit down, take a notebook, write it down to have it with pen and paper. And we talk about what are our personal goals, our relationship goals, and then also our goal with God in our marriage, within our marriage. And we want to get specific goals, like we want to be able to...
And realistic goals.
Yeah. But like we want to be able to travel to this place next year. We want to get a house in X years, right? And then also we want to make sure to spend an hour every week with each other, with God, like a devotional time. Make it very specific.
Yeah.
Something that you want to achieve later on, but also something that gets you there. A plan to do it, like the hour every week gets you closer to God. The saving 10% each month gets you to
And one
goal.
of the things that we also do, that I think we started that maybe like 2 years ago, we started that, but we'll sit down in January and we'll go, okay, like you just said, here's the things we want to achieve and our New Year's resolutions, for lack of a better phrase. But we'll also go now, and I don't know if you remember, we started doing this, I think 2 years ago. It might have been 3, but 2 years ago, where I go, okay, I want you to tell me 3 things that you want me to change. And I'll tell you 3 things that I want you to change, right? And it's a safe time to do that. It's not like we're going to get offended by that. It's just, for me, I genuinely want to know, because maybe I think everything's good. I'm like, yeah, everything's great. And you're like, dude, I feel abandoned, or I don't know, right? Like I won't know unless you tell me that, right? And so I think that moments like that are important for us to be vulnerable and to do that, right?
Yeah.
Now, this next part is also important. Verse 31, it says, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. Okay, that doesn't just mean, when it says leave your father and mother, it's not just like a physical leave your father and mother. Like I moved from this address to this address.
That's pretty physical for me.
Yes, for you, yeah, for sure. But it's not just that, though. It's not just that. What it also is referring to is your father and mother are, what's the right word? They're man, I'm blanking on this phrase, but basically they're images of what a man and a woman is to you, because that's how you grew up, right? So when you look at your dad, you're like, oh, that's what a man should be like. He should X, Y, Z, right? He should, bench press 285. He should work X amount of hours. He should buy flowers every day. However he was, right? That's programmed into
that's
you.
Like
You're
normal
like,
for
yes,
me.
that's normal to you, right? That's what, right? Now, all those things are good. What I just mentioned are good. But imagine if your idea of a father, right, that you had growing up is, well, he hit my mom, he drank a lot, he was never around. Like, so in your mind, like you just said, well, that's okay. And that's normal, what you go into the marriage with, right? Now, for you as a woman, that would be negative towards you. But if let's say that same image was what I had of my father, because that's who I grew up with as a man, then when I go into the marriage, it's not going to negatively, well, I mean, it will also negatively affect me, but it will more negatively affect you because I have the image of, well, my dad drank, my dad beat my mom, my dad XYZ, and so I'm going to do the same, or it's okay for me to do the same. So when it says leave your father and mother, it's not just a physical leave.
That is
it's
so good.
Leave the image and idea and ideologies that they had and become one with your wife. Means you get to start from zero. But a lot of times it's really hard because you don't even realize that that's programmed into you.
Do you remember last night, 2 nights ago with Honey?
Remind me. I don't remember.
Well, that's not about marriage, but about kids. I spanked Honey. And my husband freaked out. He was like, how can you spank Honey? You don't touch her. She's my baby. Yeah. And we're just like, oh my goodness. I don't even want to know how it's going to be if we have a daughter.
Yes.
He's like,
and that's why I always say I don't want a daughter because I'm so scared. But you know what? Like, and you're right, because I saw my dad, for example, he would never say anything really like, to my sister. I mean, of course he did correct her, but never the way that he did with me. And so for me, like my image, in my head is like, if I have a daughter, I'll never be able to say anything to her because she's my daughter, and that might not be right, but that's right. Like that is an image that I have, and that one's not as bad as it could be.
Yeah.
But there's other ones, right? And I've told you many times, right? Like, hey, I'm sorry that I act this way, like and I've realized that it's because I've seen this growing up, and I've told you, like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be like this anymore. I'm going to do my best to change, but here's how you could also help me. Because these are the things that like...
I have the same things.
For sure.
Yeah, definitely.
For sure.
Yeah, things from my parents that I took on that I didn't even notice. And it's so funny. Some of the things, like, they annoy me.
Yeah.
Well, I love my parents like to death, but of course there are little like tweaks, right?
Sure,
I'm like, Dad, why do you always do that? Turns out I do that too. So,
yes, 100%, 100%,
right.
and vice versa. Like I, it's the same with me, right? So you have to be able to acknowledge that and go, okay, this I might be this way because my mom or my dad was this way, and so here it says you have to leave your father and mother. So leave that, like leave those ideologies. My mom would always say, growing up, she would say, she'd say, I've done my best to raise you, but I'm not perfect. So when it's your turn to raise your children, she would say, take the good from us and leave the bad. Like if there's stuff that you think we did bad, like don't duplicate that. But you will inevitably make your own mistakes, right? and that's part of life, right? That's part of life. But to be self-aware is so important, right? It's so important. So I would challenge couples, that are listening to this. I would challenge couples this week to do something. Sit down, whether you're dating or you're married, even if you just got married or you've been married for 10 years, whatever, sit down and, in a safe environment, right?
Don't do it just once a year. Do it like once a week.
Yes, but in a safe environment, sit down and say, hey, let's say you're the guy. Maybe start yourself and say, here's some things that I want to change about myself, right? I'm going to write down 3. You write down 3 things you want to change about yourself. And then I want you also to write down 3 things that you want me to change about myself. And I'll write 3 things that you want to change about you. I want you to change about yourself. But go into it not like, okay, you've been bad or you've been, annoying, and so you got to change it. Not like that. Like, maybe even read scripture first, read this, sit down and do this exercise. And I think it's very healthy. And I think that you might even be surprised as to like what needs to be changed, right? Like imagine if you were, I don't know, you were blonde and for me, I like blonde hair, but imagine if you were blonde and I wrote on here, I want you to change your hair color. And you're like, wait, what? Like, I thought you liked this hair color.
Imagine.
Yeah, you might be surprised, right? Again, that's a dumb example, but you might be surprised by what the other person, writes down.
Yeah.
And even what they write down about yourself, because maybe you're like, I want to be less, less affectionate. And I'm like, no, don't change that. Like, I want that. Like, I want more affection or whatever, right? So I think that communication is really important. Now, right now, thus far, we've been talking about differences that maybe are, how do I say it? Maybe they're difficult or the challenging or negative even. But not all differences are negative. And you don't have to change everything about yourself. Some differences are good, right? And here's where I want to start talking about and kind of finish this conversation geared towards celebrating positive differences about yourself, because not every difference is bad.
Yeah.
You might see it that way, but it's not. I want to read Romans 12 verses 4 and 5. It says, For just as each of us has one body with many members, and these members do not all have the same function, so in Christ we, though many, form one body, and each member belongs to all the others. So this is talking about the body of Christ. It's talking about the church, right? The structure that is the church. And I've preached on this before in regards to the church, and during our series, our sermon series that we did of We Are the Church. But this is very applicable to relationships too. And that's that in here it says that we all form part of the body of Christ.
Yeah.
But the body of Christ, like our bodies, has different parts, right? And so, each part has a different function. And just because it has a different function doesn't make it less than another part. It doesn't make it worse than another part. They just serve different functions.
Yeah.
For us, in our relationship, there's a lot of differences between each other. But I think one thing that we've, with God's help, been able to do well is to celebrate those differences and actually play on them as strengths. Right.
Yeah.
So, let's do a little exercise. What do you think? What would you say are things? Give me, 3 to 5 that you think are different in me from you, and then I'll give you 3 to 5.
So easy.
Yeah, for sure. Go ahead.
All right. Number 1 is you are very spontaneous. I'm not at all. That's something that I need in my life. Otherwise, I would probably never leave my house, always have the same day, not experience anything, not step into all the things that God has for me and for our marriage. The second one is I think you are way better with just taking a deep breath and work through the pain. To just tough it out,
Yeah.
Something that I think, well,
I'm not
first
scared
of all,
of discomfort.
Yes.
Yeah.
First of all, I'm probably also because I'm a woman,
Sure.
so I'm a little bit more like, oh no, I don't want to be uncomfortable.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
I also think it's because the way I was raised, it was always like, oh no, try it. If you don't like it, it's okay.
Yeah.
And even though I liked it and I had a great life and I achieved a lot because I wanted to internally, like always want to have good grades, which is also uncomfortable that sometimes you got to study, right? But there were still moments when, okay, I was cold. I'll do anything in my power to get warm right now. I will not stay cold kind of thing. And you're like, I'll just be cold.
Yeah, it's fine.
And I remember we had moments like I got so angry at you because I was like, I'm your wife. You should want me to be warm.
Yeah.
Right? But anyways, going
I'm
into
like, you're
something
too
else right
soft.
now.
You got to toughen up more.
I'm like, no, you should be.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, so this is something I could really take from you, the being spontaneous, being okay with uncomfortable situations.
And I will also add to that, that imagine if both of us were like, I don't want to use the word soft, that sounds bad, but imagine if both of us were like not willing to be uncomfortable, right? Then I don't think we would ever go anywhere.
Yeah.
Right? Like we would never do like
Always the
progress.
shortcut.
Because there has to be one person that's like willing to go, it's fine if I don't sleep tonight. Like we'll just get this done, right?
And that inspires me then. I'm like, well, maybe I can do that too then, right?
Yeah.
The other thing also is for sure the way that you are so sure with what God has called you to do and where God placed you as a person. That showed me like, oh, okay, maybe like speaking in front of people isn't such a huge thing. Maybe it's actually doable. You make it look very easily. And I mean, I'm next to you 24, like by your side 24/7. So it shows me that so much more is possible than I think it is. The other thing is organization. I'm very like type A. I want to have everything structured and organized. And even though you're like that at church at
and
work,
home.
right? At home you aren't. And even though it drives me crazy to 50% of the time, it still helps me also in moments like when I'm very busy, I'm like, maybe it's not such a big deal if I don't clean this up right now. Like maybe it's okay if I do it later, right? It's silly things, little things like that, but yeah.
Yeah, I would say I agree 100% on those. I would say that, differences between you and you are, and I think I've talked about this before. I don't know if on a podcast or if it was in a Vine group, but I think it might have been a Vine group. One day, this is in our first year of marriage. I had just preached somewhere. I don't remember where it was. and you sent an email to a big church you remember, in the area, like a big church in our area. And you were like, now this is like, again, this is a big, it's not even just a church, like a big organization. And you like send them an email that I didn't know you were sending this email. And you were just like, hey, by the way, I want to let you know my husband's a preacher, and you guys should have him
really
over
good.
and you should invite him. And I remember when you told me that, in the moment, I felt like so embarrassed. I was like, why would you send that? Like, no, how could you have done that? Like, and I almost felt like you're so, like, the word that probably came to my mind in that moment was like, you're so naive, or but then the Lord showed me that I needed that, and I need someone like that, because of life experiences that I've been through, I can be at times maybe cynical about situations, and I could be like, that would never happen, or like, that's just impossible. Like, that's like, I know how the system works. Let's talk about business, right? Like, because you've done that even with business too. Like, you would tell everyone, by the way, my husband has this business. You should hire him. And like, and I was like, what? Why would you do that? Like, no, that's not how it's supposed to work. But what I loved about that, and I love about that still about you now, is that you are someone that thinks and believes like it's possible. Like, everything's possible. And maybe in times I'll go like, nah, it'll never work. But if I always thought that, then I would never, maybe strive for something else, right? So I definitely, that's a difference between us, that you're a lot more, I'll use the word innocent about a lot of things, but I love that. I would hate to be with someone that is like me, that's like, no, we could never do anything. Like, I would hate to be with someone like that. So I love that about you. Another thing that I think is very different between you and I is, you're a lot more. I think I'm okay at this because I'm in comparison to my dad. Okay, what I'm about to say. But then when I compare myself to you, I'm like, I can be better at this, and that's it. You are very like. I don't know if the right word is like caring about people. Like, you're more caring in the way of like, it's someone's birthday and you know that it's someone's birthday. Like, just starting there, I'd have no idea. Like Facebook has to notify me, or someone has to tell me. I don't know. Like, I'm just like, today's Wednesday. Like, I got stuff to do. But you're like, no, today's these 3 people's birthdays, and I know that this person likes chocolate. I know this person likes flowers. So I'm going to write letters. I'm going to get a flower. I'm going to get a chocolate. Like you're attentive to that. And to me, I'm just like, oh, it's your birthday? Oh, happy birthday. Like, and I already think I'm better at that than my dad, right? Because my dad, that's even worse at that. So, but I like that about you. That's for sure very, I think very different between you and I. But that's very good. And the last thing that I'll say is, I think that you're a lot more, probably like cautious when it comes to things.
I would have never guessed you'd say that.
Yeah, because I'm a dreamer.
But you always tell me I don't see anything.
Yes, but that's not what I'm talking about.
Okay.
That's clumsy. That's a different thing. You are clumsy. Yes. But no, I'm talking about I'm a dreamer. Like, I want to one day do X, Y, Z, right? And we were just talking about, can you pass me that candle actually that's over there? Let me bring this up as a good example. Shout out our team. So every time we go on vacation, right? Shout out Adasa, you broke this candle, by the way. But every time we go on vacation, I have this thing where we're like, and I think this happened, do you remember? I remember when this happened. Do you remember where we were when we thought of this?
Either Disneyland or Universal.
Disneyland, yeah. So
we were in a ride.
We were in line for, at the time it was the Tower of Terror. Now it's Guardians of the Galaxy. And we were waiting for like an hour and a half, and we're just like there, and we're there, and other people are playing games on their phone. They're doing like the heads up the game, and I'm over here like, what business could we start? Like, as if we needed,
here we go again.
As if we needed, to do more things.
Yes.
I'm like, bro, we already have enough to do. But in my mind, I'm like, how could we make more money? Like, what business could we start? And I'm like, you know what? We should do a candle business. And I remember you were like, oh my God, here we go. Because I do this all the time, right? And I'm like, yeah, we're going to do a candle business. And, we're going to be like, our niche in the candle industry will be that there'll be like Hispanic candles, like, where we'll do it seasonal. So during cold times, it'll be like, arroz con leche as the smell. And then they're like champurrado or I don't know, like, and then during the summer, we can do like Jamaica and different stuff, right? Piña, right? Like different stuff. But that was just a thought. And then that night, No, from there already. I already started looking at like, okay,
You
what do you
went,
need
like,
to
yeah.
make candles? How do you ship them? What does packaging look like? That night, I was like, okay, what size are the labels? I started designing logos. Within 2 weeks, we had our prototypes, right? And
Yeah.
and we were in our kitchen for like 2 days straight. Like it looked like a meth lab, like cooking up like
my
candle
goodness.
mixes and stuff. And
Trying to find
it
the
smells
right
good
smell.
though. It
Yeah.
smells good. Yeah, it smells good. But I remember like, for me, this is like, yes, we're going to do it. And I remember I told you, I even showed you like the numbers. I was like, this is how much we're going to need to like invest into this for this to take off. Right. And then you were like, are you sure that's a smart investment? Like, I don't know. And I was like, trust me, I made the calculations. We're going to be millionaires in 3 years. Like, I don't even trip, right? And you were like, are you sure? Let's just get a smaller batch first. And I was like, all right. Because I was ready to mass produce. I was like, let's do this. Like, and I did a photo shoot even. You remember I did a photo shoot with this. It actually came out pretty cool. Pop-up pictures right here. But I did a photo shoot. And this is just an example of like, I'm a dreamer. I'm like,
let's just do
let's
it.
just do it. Let's jump into this, right? And you're someone that is a lot more cautious when it comes to that stuff because you're an accountant, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're like, well, we don't actually have that much to do this. And yeah, exactly. So those are things that are different. Now, in the early years of our marriage, we've been married now we're in our 7th year of marriage, almost a decade married.
Wow.
But in our earlier years, it was maybe frustrating at times for me, where I was like, why don't you dream more like me? Like, why are you so fixed on numbers? Like, God will provide. Don't worry about the numbers, right? But now I realized you do need how I am, but I also need how you are. And that balances us.
Yeah.
We probably still have money because of you, right? But we've also probably been able to,
Achieve so much more.
Yes, right? Because of the dreams that God puts in my mind. So the mix of both and working together hand in hand have been good.
Yeah.
What I was talking about you being a lot more sensitive to like people and stuff. Again, that has been really good, especially as pastors. But then also on my side, I know I've been able to help you through like, if someone says something that maybe offended you,
Oh, yeah.
like you will marinate on that. And I'm like,
Yes.
no, like just like that's just how people are. Like just get through it and don't forget it. Like just forget about it, right? And so we need that. Like
Yeah.
we both can't be like super soft and sensitive to everything. Like one needs to be, stronger. One needs to be maybe more sensitive.
Yeah.
So you need that in one another.
Yeah.
In the first season of marriage, you want to talk about how maybe you felt a little pressure, and then what I told you about when it came to preaching and ministry?
Yeah, I loved, and I still do love to be behind the scenes a lot. I love preparing the house. I love serving in a way that I can prepare things, like getting coffee ready in the morning, organizing things here at church,
Yeah.
doing things behind the scenes, not being in the center of attention. And I thought that's where I will always stay.
Yeah.
Well, one day, slowly you started having me...
But what did I tell you? Remember? When you started feeling pressure from people.
Oh, back there. Okay. I'm jumping again.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But what did yeah.
You told me that no matter what people tell me, I should never feel the pressure and that
Of like preaching or.
of preaching. Yeah. And that you thought too in the beginning that some pastors' wives are just behind the scenes and that's where God calls them to.
Well, I remember I told you in the beginning, I said, this is where you're in right now. This is the season you're in right now. So for right now, don't feel pressure from other people or don't worry about the pressure other people might put on you because I will not put that pressure on you right now. Because I recognize that even though some pastors' wives preach, some pastors' wives also don't. Some are more technical and they do more of like the behind the scenes stuff. So that might be where God's calling you right now. And that's also where you're comfortable. So that's great. And you needed, I think, spiritual growth before you stepped on to preach, right?
Yeah.
But then as time went by, that changed. And it wasn't until one day, and we've talked about that. I felt from the Lord that now it was time.
Yeah.
And now you're preaching and stuff. But I bring that up because at the beginning, I could have very easily been like, why aren't you preaching like me? Like, why aren't you at least singing or doing something, right? Like, you should do something on stage, right?
Yeah.
Like, because that's what I do. But actually, much of the success of like, and just to use that word, right? I'm not saying like Paul, I'm not saying we've made it or anything, but just like whatever I've been able to achieve in terms of my preaching or in terms of like pastoring has been a lot in part, I think majority in part, to things that people didn't see behind the scenes that you helped me with, right? And so like I definitely attribute that to you, and I credit that to you. Now in this season of our life, you've had to do still that and now start preaching, right? And it is a challenge, but it's grown you, I think, right? It's been able to stretch you. So I think that again, people change, and you have to be sensitive to that. That's why this conversation can't be a one-time thing. It's not like just when we were dating and just the first time that we got married, at the beginning of our marriage.
Yeah.
But it has to be continuous.
Yeah.
All the time
That
we
is
have
so
to be having this
important.
conversation. So thank you for having this conversation live with me. I believe that differences were put in place by the Lord for a purpose.
Yeah.
And all things work together for the good of those that love the Lord.
Amen.
So we love the Lord. We've been called according to his purpose. We believe that, if you love the Lord and are called to his purpose, that all things work together as well for you. So celebrate each other's differences and the things that maybe are, difficult about one another, and the things that maybe are challenging, talk about them. Sit down and don't, I love what you said, don't talk to, down to the person, but address the problem, right? Don't address the person, address the problem. And I like that a lot. So, I think a great way to do that is if you're doing something that maybe hurts me, to not be like, stop doing that, but to tell you, hey, I want to just be open with you. Can I? And you would be like, yeah, I've started feeling a certain way about this thing that's been happening. Now and I could try to be understanding about that. Hey, I understand that maybe that's how you were raised. What could we do? Is there something I can do to help with that? And from that point, I think anything's possible. But when you just start going like, I don't like this about you, and you should change, and stop being like that, and then I think you're not going to get anywhere. Exactly, you're not going to get anywhere. So differences are gonna be there. Some are for your benefit. Some you might need to change, but both of them you can work through it together.
Yeah.
So thank you for having this conversation with me. Thank you guys for tuning in. I pray that you have a wonderful rest of your week. We're going to be doing more of these, here throughout. This specifically in 2025, I want to be doing a lot more of these because I think they're good. They're very healthy, and we've been getting a lot of couples also at our church. So that'll be great. I pray that you guys have a blessed rest of your week, and I will see you in the next one. God bless you.